There, we started the recording, and so this will be available to all of you following the completion of this webinar. We also have interpretation, which has been spotlighted, so you should be able to see that. And we also have closed captioning as well, and that option is available to all. So welcome, everyone. We're so excited to be here with you today. Happy Global Digital Accessibility Awareness Day. It's really exciting to be with you to be talking about a very important topic for, I think, all of us that work in the digital world, which is everyone. We all send emails, we're all on social media and you know, going through websites and things like that every day. So as I mentioned, BNID, we are one of the organizations co-hosting this webinar. I just wanted to share a little bit about who we are. For those of you who are in the Boston area, you may want to sign up for our newsletter or our membership program. We are a network of nonprofit organizations, students, professionals, practitioners, and community members who feel passionate about international aid, whether that's working in the peace building sector, in public health, education, anything kind of that touches that international affairs, international aid work. We hold networking events as opportunities to get to know other folks interested in this space. We also have our membership program. So if you're joining from a Boston-based INGO, I highly recommend you click on that membership link there to learn more. We have about 35 members currently, including the Perkins School for the Blind. And it's just a great way to meet other folks doing similar work in the Boston area and to share resources and learn from one another. And so today, so excited to be hosting this webinar with one of our member organizations. We'll be hearing from three speakers. We'll be hearing from Daniela Gissara from the Perkins International Programs, as well as Kelsey Bronski from Perkins Access. And we have a very special guest with us today, Jose Viera, who will be speaking about his experience in working in and with digital accessibility in particular. And so with that, I'll hand it over to Daniela to tell us a little bit more about Perkins as one of the co-hosts of this webinar.
Thank you so much, Nanako. It's such a pleasure to be here with you all, so many friends and colleagues. So thank you so much for joining us today. Well, at Perkins, we are the worldwide leader in the education of children and young adults who are blind, visually impaired, and have multiple disabilities. Can you hear me? Yes. As an international NGO, we're always innovating to solve emerging problems facing our communities here in the United States and in more than 97 countries. A big part of our mission is to build a more accessible digital world. And we do this because we believe accessibility and inclusion are human rights. Every human being has their own special gifts and talents to offer to the world. But the world is built to accommodate people without disabilities. Considering 1 in 4 people have a disability worldwide, we believe it should be, of course, the other way around. So disability inclusion for us is taking steps to level the playing field. It is erasing stigma, changing attitudes, and embracing people. It is bringing perspectives and new ways of being that truly create a more vibrant, authentic reflection of our human race. It is speaking up to ensure all people are treated with the respect and dignity they deserve. At Perkins, we are committed to breaking down society's barrier to inclusion. And how do we do this? Well, we do it by, for example, celebrating the achievements of the children and adults we have reached all across the world, and by sharing the lessons we have learned about accessibility. And this is the reason why we are here with you today. On this Global Accessibility Awareness Day, I invite you all to enjoy the presentation on digital accessibility my Perkins colleague, Kelsey Bronski, has put together for us, and to learn from my dear friend and advocate, Jose Viera from the International Disability Alliance about the lessons he has to share with us from a user perspective. So let's hear from the experts and let's start building together a more inclusive world online. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniela. I am going to just add a spotlight so everyone can see me as well. And I'm going to share my screen. And just hold on one moment while I get this set up for everybody. That was such a great introduction. And I'd first just like to thank Hanako and BNID, and I'd like to thank all of you for being here today on Global Accessibility Awareness Day. And like Daniela explained, at Perkins, disability inclusion is such a huge part of our mission, but it's so often left out of the conversation. And the department I work within at Perkins is called Perkins Access. And Perkins Access is a team of digital accessibility consultants who partner with all types of organizations, from America's Test Kitchen here in Boston to Amica Insurance and even the most recent presidential inauguration. And what we do is we work with those organizations to make their experiences inclusive of people with disabilities. Now, worldwide, there's over 1.3 billion people with disabilities, and that number should seem really large. And like Daniela said, 1 in 4 adults in the US have a disability. So I just wanted to put that into context and really broaden your point of view and definition on what disability means. Sorry, my mouse stopped working for a moment. So the 4 primary types of disabilities will affect someone's ability to see or hear or process information. And that impacts the way someone interacts with websites, emails, documents, any type of digital material. And visual disabilities can range from someone who has a color deficiency. 1 in 12 men have color deficiency and 1 in 200 women have color deficiency. And that makes it difficult to distinguish between 2 different colors. But a visual disability could also be someone who has limited peripheral vision or no sight at all. Auditory disabilities are also on a spectrum, and someone might have a slight difficulty hearing, or they might not have any hearing at all. Cognitive disabilities includes short-term, long-term memory loss. It includes autism, dyslexia, and many other impairments that you might be familiar with, and you maybe never consider them to be a disability before, but accessibility does impact all of these groups of people. And motor disability includes having trouble with fine motor control, which could be someone with arthritis, or it even includes someone who has no mobility due to paralysis. So it's really a broad range of people. And that's why when we say 1.3 billion people, disability includes so many different demographics and types of people all over the world. And it also includes temporary disabilities or situational disabilities. And these might change or progress as we age. So it really is a large group of people that we're talking about. And now that you have an idea of what disability means and why we're here to talk about it today, I wanted to invite Jose to join the discussion and share his point of view. I think it will be really valuable to all of us. And Jose, after you introduce yourself, I wanted to hear from you. When organizations are thinking about DEI and their commitments, how does something like accessibility fit into that inclusion effort? And let's see, I'm going to pin you here so everyone can see you as well.
Hello, can you hear me? I just want to make sure that my voice is going through well.
We can hear you.
Perfect, excellent. Thank you very much. First of all, I would really like to thanks the organizers of this event for inviting me. I believe that that if we really want to think a world for all, we need to join forces and seeing around this virtual room and seeing people from different areas, university, education sector, business, international cooperation, networks of NGOs, et cetera, et cetera. I think it's the best, it's a very good combination. But just trying to answer your question, your first question.
Absolutely. And one of the things I know you and I talked,
Sorry, go ahead.
oh, sorry. I
No,
was
no,
going
go
to
ahead.
say, one of the things that we talked about before was what happens when accessibility isn't considered? You know, it's such a natural fit, like you said, but what about when it's not considered at all?
Right. I would like to invite all of us to look at the issue regarding accessibility as a precondition for inclusion. In other words, when accessibility is not considered, we are basically not creating the necessary measures or the necessary conditions for a person with disabilities, any kind of disability, to actually freely choose how to live in the community, right? So I think sometimes we understand accessibility as one of the many aspects of social inclusion, which is correct. But in my opinion, it is clear if we do not have accessibility measures in the healthcare system, there is no way the person with disabilities would have access to the right to health. If we do not think of universal design and accessibility for electoral systems, people with disabilities would not have the right, or will not fulfill, we are not going to fulfill the right for persons to disability with disabilities to participate in political life. So that's how I believe accessibility should be seen, and we really need to make sure that if we do not believe or we don't consider accessibility as a precondition for inclusion, all what we are doing is just trying to fix problems. And the last comment that I would like to make here is that we really need to kind of differentiate what is like a fixing problem approach, which is great and is very much appreciated by the disability community. But a different story is if we from the minute zero, we think projects, it can be online, it can be physical, it can be on education, it can be on political participation, employment, et cetera, et cetera. If we think right from the beginning in an accessible and an inclusive way.
That's a great point, Jose. At Perkins Access, we always recommend, we call it building it in. So when you're creating something new, including accessibility from the start versus launching a new website and then going back and making those changes, like you said, fixing problems, instead just creating it so that there aren't any problems. And you had told me before about a really positive experience you had that was just accessible right from the start. And I was wondering if you could describe that and bring that to life for everyone. You know, what is an accessibility barrier like when you aren't able to do something, and especially something necessary, like you brought up, like healthcare and education? And then what's a positive experience like, and how does that go for you?
Yeah, thank you. I always like to share a very personal experience, which I'm sure has happened to many people in this room. So I'm currently living in Canada, but I was born and raised in Argentina. And I remember one of the things that I really found amazing, and I was completely and positively impressed by, was when I moved to Canada and start doing my banking stuff. from opening a bank account, having access to credit card statements, checking how my investments were doing, etc., etc. I think because that was fully accessible, I realized what it means when we talk about autonomy, right? And I naturally compared my banking experience in Canada with my previous experience, that of course was most costly. It was definitely more expensive. I mean, just to be very clear, because the banking system was not accessible. So if I wanted to withdraw some money from my account, I would have to go to the branch and take the money from there. That implies that because the transport system was not fully accessible, that I had to go by taxi. That means that my access to the banking system in Argentina was first, not accessible, second, more expensive, and in a way, and I think for me this is more the most important thing, I was not autonomously able to do something very basic as my banking. So when you start kind of assessing the consequences, the impact of accessibility in the life of any person with disabilities, you start including in your analysis the extra costs associated to having a disability, the impact, in this case, the Canadian experience, how positive, how free you feel, how independence play in your favor. And there is, I would say, a cascade effect, because if you have an accessible banking system and a person with disability has freely access to the banking system, that person with disability becomes a customer, becomes someone who is willing to spend more money, someone who is willing to make more money. And so the banking system maybe push another system, I don't know, online purchases to be accessible. So I think when you start this change of accessibility, we cannot stop. It's unstoppable. And on the other hand, yeah, what I was saying, like not an accessible system creates a lot of barrier, creates extra cost, creates longer waiting time, and above all, it doesn't encourage you to be independent and autonomous.
Thank you, Jose. That's a great point, and I hope that helped everyone really understand what we mean when we're talking about accessibility barriers and positive accessible experiences. And on Global Accessibility Awareness Day, Jose, do you have any final comments for all of our viewers here? If they can do one thing today, what would you encourage them to do?
Um, I think learning more from model like Perkins Access, the whole environment, the whole Perkins environment, working in education, in employment, and understanding that person with disabilities, we are equally part of the society, is the first thing that I would like to leave with for the participants. But I also want to make like two quick more comments. The first one is accessibility is not just for people with disabilities, right? So we can think of many examples where accessibility is also a benefit for everyone, right? It creates more opportunity, it creates equal access to everyone. So don't think about accessibility just for people with disabilities. Think it as an asset for the society in general. And the last thing to say is that eh, it's incredible what accessibility creates for person with disabilities, right? For those like me who have kids, the fact that you can watch a cartoon with your child and have access to audio description, so you can talk about the cartoon with your kid, it's also about autonomy. It's also about the right to have a family, the right to be a parent, and the right to be fully inclusive in the society. So accessibility is not just access. Accessibility is the tool for inclusion and for persons with disabilities to be productive agent of any society. Those are, I don't know, like very general reflections that I always like to share for those, especially with those who are shaping the future. And I hope that future can be for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Jose. I really appreciate you sharing your perspective with us. It was so valuable hearing from you. And I think everyone will fulfill your challenge to learn more today as I get into some of my tips. But one thing that I'm not going to cover that I want to encourage everyone to do based on what Jose just said is audio description is a way for people who are visually impaired or blind to watch movies and TV and hear described what some of the important aspects are that aren't in the dialogue. It's an additional audio. And next time you're on Netflix or Hulu, go in and turn audio description on and hear what that experience is like. It's what Jose was just talking about, watching cartoons with his children. And I think it will be a really informative experience for everyone. So thank you again, Jose. I really, really appreciate you being here. I know how busy you are. Now I'd like to share with everyone a little bit more about what digital accessibility really means. And I'm going to follow that with some tips that everybody here can put into practice today and going forward so that they can start improving digital accessibility. And what digital accessibility means is that the needs of people with disabilities have been included in the design and development. And that's what we're talking about when we say build it in. So if you're going to redesign your website, it means when you're choosing your vendor, you're talking about accessibility. You're making sure that the templates from the very beginning are accessible instead of getting to the end of a brand new awesome website and realizing, wow, we never thought about accessibility. Now we have to go back and make changes. And accessibility is so much more than just websites. So much of how we interact today is online. It's mobile apps, it's digital displays for products you have at home, it's kiosks and connected products. It's really anything with a digital interface. And so it really impacts a lot of different experiences. And I would like to cover some tips for you all on some common accessibility barriers so we can all start removing those barriers together. And I'm going to share tips on image descriptions, meaningful hyperlinks, closed captions, and color contrast. Image descriptions can be added across all of your content. That means you can be adding image descriptions in email, across all social media, on your website, and in your documents. And what an image description does is it gives a screen reader user, and a screen reader is an assistive technology that someone who is blind or visually impaired uses to access web content. And an image description is going to give a screen reader user information about an image. If there's no image description, the screen reader can't describe the image to the user. And what the description is a text alternative, and it's in the code. So it's not visible on the screen. It's just there for people who need it. And so when I write image descriptions, which is alt text, and that's what you're going to be looking to add when you are on social media and your website and all those different places. These are the 3 tips that I follow and I keep in mind when I'm writing alt text. And the first is to put the most important details at the beginning. The second is to keep the description concise. You don't need to add a ton of detail and describe everything that's happening. You want to add the most important and meaningful pieces. And the third is that you don't need to start the image description by writing image of or photo of. You can just give the description And I have an example of that here from UNICEF's Twitter in the alt text. The alt text is here, and it says a group of adolescent girls. Sorry, this is so small on my screen that I actually can't read it. But it is describing the image, and it's saying that there's a group of adolescent girls gathering around to read a comic book in India. And that is giving a description for anyone who can't see this photo on Twitter. It's letting them know what this post is all about and sharing that information. And if you want to start seeing how other people are writing alt text and get examples, you can see in the bottom left corner of a tweet, there's a little alt tag. It says ALT in a black box. And if you click on that, you'll be able to view the image description. So that's one way Twitter has made accessibility a little bit more accessible, and it allows anybody to look at the alt text. So you can start getting some inspiration from other people and looking at what they're writing for image descriptions. And it's pretty simple to add alt text. You should be able to just search how to add alt text on Twitter, how to add alt text on LinkedIn, and you'll get the really simple steps there if you're curious about how to do that. Next, I want to talk about hyperlinks. They're a really important part to being accessible, because someone who can't use a mouse and uses a keyboard to navigate the web needs to get from link to link easily. And if you're using the keyboard to get from link to link, it's way more helpful if the link is understood on its own versus being in context. So a link like click here or learn more isn't that descriptive, and it doesn't tell you where you're going to go if you click there. You don't know what the page is going to be about. And what I always like to do is place the link on text that clearly and uniquely describes where it's going to go. So the example I have here is a very format that you've probably seen on many websites, where there's 6 different items and they're all similar, but they're different. And instead of each of these items saying learn more, learn more, learn more, they say read more about Mexico, find out about Perkins, India. And so, you know, when you specifically click on that link, you're going to go to the Perkins, India page. And that is really helpful. So to write meaningful hyperlinks, remember, place the link on text that clearly describes where the link goes, and avoid using hyperlinks like click here and learn more. One other reason for this is that screen reader users often pull, by doing a keyboard command, all the links on one page so they can quickly navigate to where they want to go. But if all the links say click here, click here, click here, it's not very helpful. So it's important to use meaningful hyperlinks. And as you practice, you'll get better at doing that. But it really is something that benefits everyone. To Jose's point, accessibility helps everyone. And if your call to action is subscribe to my newsletter, that should be the hyperlink, not click here. And that's where the focus will go on subscribe to the newsletter. So it's really something that is beneficial for everybody. Now, another example of something that's beneficial for everybody is closed captions. And captions give critical access to people who are deaf or hard of hearing, but they're also used by many more people. So if you're creating video content, I recommend adding captions as a part of your process. There are a lot of auto or AI generated caption tools out there, but just remember that these tools don't meet accessibility requirements unless you confirm that the captions are fully accurate. So auto captions usually need significant editing, and if they're not accurate, then it's not easy to understand them. Captions actually have to be 99% accurate to be understood. And right now, auto captions are more like 60 to 70% accurate. And what I am showing here is an example of, let's see, I'm showing an example from the movie Frozen of Olaf is here on the screen, and the caption from YouTube when I looked at this clip was ice Pilates for one, ice Pilates for one. And the actual line and that's from auto captions, the actual line is ice palace for one, ice palace for one. And that's just showing an example of how auto captions is slightly off, and ice Pilates sounds like a cool sport, but that's not what Olaf is talking about. That example is a little bit of a silly example, but imagine that you're watching a cooking video with captions and you're not listening to the audio, and the audio is saying broil on high for 4 or 5 minutes, but the caption says broil on high for 45 minutes. If you've ever used your broiler, you know dinner's definitely ruined after 45 minutes, but it could start a fire. I mean, that's a dangerous mistake. So having accurate captions is really critical, and it's something, again, that's going to benefit so many people. What I like to do is sometimes I use auto captions as a first draft, and then I go back and review them and make sure they're accurate. And then I put that accurate caption file on my videos going forward. So captions are something that everyone can add to their videos, and I hope going forward that's something you include in your process. Now, my last tip is about color contrast, and color contrast is actually one of the biggest accessibility issues on the web today. And color is also really important to digital design and web pages. And it's something that, you know, if you're a marketer, you might be really thoughtful about how you're using it for attracting users and conveying your information, but ensuring that the contrast is high enough between the foreground and background is really important to do. Users with color deficiency or low visibility might find it difficult to view something if the contrast is too low. I have an example here where yes is in white letters on a dark blue background, and next to it no is in blue letters on a dark blue background, and yes should be easier to read and clearer. And that's an example of why contrast is important. But contrast is also important for everybody. A common style a few years ago was this light gray text on a white background, and I'm sure everyone here has struggled to see that when they've been on the web before, and that can be really frustrating. But it also can be worsened depending on lighting, or if you're outside and there's glare, the contrast could be lowered. So that's why having high contrast is really important. And I am going to put in the chat a resource everyone can use to check color contrast for their organization. It's a color contrast checker, and it's a great tool to use. I'll put that in the chat at the end, a couple links, and we can probably follow up by email with a few resource links as well. But I hope that these tips have been really helpful and that you've learned something new about image descriptions and hyperlinks, captions, and contrast. I hope that I've convinced you today how important digital accessibility is, and I want to challenge all of you here to be accessibility champions at your own organization. And one way you can do that is I have a great resource at perkinsaccess.org/A11Y, and I'll share that link as well so everyone has it. But you can use this resource to start the conversation at your organization and really talk about, are we considering people with disabilities? Have we thought about accessibility? And that's going to help you start making improvements, but it really starts with that education and awareness and getting buy-in from your team. And you can also stay informed by subscribing to our monthly newsletter. It's once a month, latest news, tips, different resources, events coming up, so you can stay informed and continue to learn. And so that is something that I think will be really helpful as you continue this journey all year round. It's great to be celebrating Global Accessibility Awareness Day today, but for Perkins Access, it's something that we like to talk about every single day. So please do connect with us. And at this time, I think it would be great to take some questions, and I'll turn it over to Nanako to facilitate that for us here. Thank
Can I
you
just
all.
ask a quick question? It looks like A11Y, but it looks like ALLY. Which one is that?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's A11Y,
Okay.
and that is a short term in the accessibility disability community that stands for accessibility, because there's 11 letters between A and Y, and it is supposed to kind of look like ally. So just to kind of describe the history of A11Y, that is why it does visibly look like ally.
Amazing.
And we can put that in the, I see here, thank you for sharing it in the chat. And we will put the contrast checker in the chat as well. I'm going to put that here to everybody. And do we have any other questions? Oh, I'll put the newsletter in.
Nanako, you're on mute.
Thank you. I said, yes, we do have a few questions in the chat. Let me see. So we have a few questions. I'll go just straight in order, in the order that we received them. We had one question saying, you mentioned different tools for captions. So there's a question here about, can you share any AI tools for captions?
Sure. So when you upload your video to YouTube, it is going to, after a couple hours, there will be a file of auto captions, and you can edit right in YouTube's system those captions to make them more accurate. So that's one way, right? Built into YouTube is the auto captions. There's also a few different organizations that provide that service. One of them is AI Media, who we have doing our live captions. We have a person here with us today typing those captions live, but there's a 3Play Media, and rev.com is another one. And you can send the video and get back a file that then you can go and review and update yourself.
Great, thank you so much. And I also invite, we have many people here on the webinar that maybe you have resources that that you've used that have worked really well in terms of captions. So please feel free to share those in the chat as well. We had another question. Sorry, let me just go up to it. From Karen Feinberg. I'm guessing you're asking, do you work with ChatGPT as part of this process? Is that what you're thinking of?
Yeah, ChatGPT.
Yeah.
The AI tool.
For captions?
Yeah, for an audio, and how can someone use it with vision impairment and all of that.
Oh,
included?
Can someone with vision impairment use ChatGPT? Is that the question?
I guess so. And just working with that particular platform, so it can become more accessible in all the ways that you were sharing today, because it's a very powerful tool. Good, bad, ugly, I would say. But
I honestly have never used ChatGPT, so I don't know
it's a pretty
any
tool.
thing personally about it.
Probably important for it to become more accessible in the way that you're talking about.
I'm sure, and I haven't heard anything about the accessibility of Chat GTP, but
GBT.
GBT. I have not heard whether or not people are finding it to be accessible, but there are some organizations
GBT, sorry.
that really focus on accessibility. So for instance, Apple and Google and Amazon, they're all building their experiences with accessibility in mind. So experiences from those organizations are usually going to have thought about accessibility, and they work on accessibility and they focus on it. But I haven't heard anything from my colleagues or anyone we're talking with as to whether or not that experience is accessible. But yeah, it does sound like something that we would want to make sure everybody has the opportunity to use.
Great. And then we have another question here on a specific thing. You were talking about social media earlier. And this question is from Natalia. Asking how can you deal with hyperlink tags in LinkedIn, for example, that don't allow you to write the hyperlink name as desired, right? It just populates it.
So what I usually do on social media in that case is I say right before the link where it's going to go to. So I say, read more about our work in India at Perkins International, and then I just do colon and the link so that someone knows where that link is going to send them to versus just having the link there on its own. And usually on Twitter, you can't write that much before, but I might say read more via New York Times colon link. So it's good just to give someone a sense of if they click on the link, where is it going to bring them to? And sometimes that is limited on social media, but I always try to, on LinkedIn, you definitely have room to say, check out our new resource on the best digital accessibility tips, and then someone will have a sense of where they're going to be directed to.
Great, thank you. And if you other folks, I think those are all the questions that we currently have in the chat, but if you have other questions, please feel free to put them in the chat, or you can raise your hand. I'm happy to answer any questions as you think of them. I have a couple. I will take an opportunity to ask a couple while we have you. You covered so much, and it's just, I find, it's amazing when you really take a step back to think about how much we rely on and we really take for granted the way that we interact with digital systems, like every day, from email to social media, newsletters, things like that. And I know that, here at BNID, we've tried to do some of the things you've talked about in terms of hyperlinks or like with hashtags, I guess it's called like camel hump, or using capital letters to make it easier to read, things like that. But, there's so much to do and so much that you've covered here. What would you say if an organization is newer to this, where's a good place to get started? Like, how can people kind of ease into this without getting overwhelmed by all the things they can and should be doing?
Absolutely. So I think the best starting place is if this is really the first time you're hearing about accessibility. I'm sure it seems overwhelming, and I think that intro page that I shared would be a great place to really orient yourself on digital accessibility, how it is going to fit in at your organization and what it means. And that has some really common accessibility questions answered, kind of in a like, there's no stupid questions here way. And it walks you through the reasons so many organizations are prioritizing disability inclusion and digital accessibility. And then it kind of gives you like, here's the 3 things to do. Like, first, bring a conversation at your organization and get a sense of where your organization stands, get your leadership team to buy into it, and then come up with a plan so you can make improvements. And that's something that Perkins Access helps organizations do and guides organizations through. We don't expect everyone to become experts in accessibility, but once you become aware and you commit to it, that's when you can, bring someone like Perkins in and get that roadmap in place. And I'm gonna share a tool that you could use to get a really kind of basic evaluation of your site. You could run this tool that I put in here, the Wave tool, and that is going to show you errors and warnings, and tools aren't going to show everything and they can't really interpret it the way a person could, but it's going to show you some issues, and then you can get a sense of your website. And one thing I'll tell you is that of the top million websites, over 96% of them have issues on their homepage. So it's very likely that, everyone here's website when they run this tool is going to have issues. And someone like Perkins Access could really help you prioritize and remove those barriers and make experiences that are usable for everyone. And so this at least can give you kind of a sense of the situation. So that's another recommendation I have.
Great, thank you so much. I have one last question. So for those of you who are maybe thinking about your question, this would be the time to either type it in the chat or raise your hand. This is gonna be my last question. So again, BNID is a network of international nonprofit organizations and folks that work abroad. And so a lot of our members and people in our community are doing their digital outreach, right, globally. Do you have any recommendations? Is it just the same? Is it the same for whether your audience is here in the US, or your audience is international, or does the guidance change at all when you're thinking about digital accessibility?
I would say that it's pretty much the same. Worldwide, the standards vary slightly, but they all have, in terms of the law and what those guidelines are. In the US, I would say most organizations are working towards the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, and that's kind of the criteria we're working towards here. But I know that there's some slightly different laws in Canada and in the UK, but overall, I would say that global organizations are all kind of thinking about accessibility in the same way and are moving towards building it in, and are moving towards inclusive design like Jose was talking about, and really building it into your process versus just compliance and like checking off a box for accessible. I think more organizations across the world are really thinking about it in a intentional and proactive way. So that is one thing that I've noticed. And Daniela, I don't know if you have any point of view on, why accessibility is so important from a global lens that you want to add, but I think that would be a nice kind of like wrap up comment here. I've really enjoyed talking with everybody and sharing about this. I hope it was helpful. I'm sure it was a lot to take in, and we can share our email addresses with everybody. If anyone would like to follow up with us, I can share those here.
Thank you, Kelsey. Well, just to wrap up, really just to say, there is no way we're going to achieve inclusion for all if we don't make our digital environments, our work environments, our buildings, facilities, school and places more accessible. So really, it's just, a global effort that we're working on, and we really have to do it all together for people with disabilities and for everybody, right? As Jose was sharing with us before. This has been really like a wonderful hour that we spent together. I hope you can, take these tips and suggestions and start, applying into your emails and social media and documents that you are creating. I really appreciate everybody who came to this webinar today. So thank you so much to all.
Thank you, Daniela. And I'm just going to read aloud these email addresses for everybody, and I have them up here on the screens if anyone needs to reach out to any of us here today. We have nanako at bnid.org, which is NANAKO at bnid.org. Jose, you can contact him at JMVIERA at ida-secretariat.org. Perkins Access is access@perkins.org, and Daniela is Daniela Gissara at perkins.org, DANIELA.GISSARA at perkins.org. So please reach out if you need to. I'm happy to answer any other questions. Thank you again. And I was really glad to join this. I'm happy to share with all of you, and please continue to raise awareness today and all the other days about accessibility.
Cheers to that. Thank you so
Great.
much.
Thank you all. Have a wonderful afternoon.